Hello and welcome to Immediate Immersion Live. Today, I'm going to talk about bridging relationships. So, are you sick and tired of dealing with bad behavior? Are you looking to create a more harmonious, inclusive classroom? Are you looking for an easy to implement classroom management plan? Then you're in the right place. I'm going to give you some killer strategies that will totally shake things up and revolutionize the way you connect and manage your students. My name is Scott, and you're watching Immediate Immersion Live, where we're all about comprehension based instruction in the modern language classroom. Stay tuned, we'll be right back. And welcome back to Immediate Immersion Live. Today we're talking about building bridges. And so I want to start off by talking about the importance of positive student-teacher relationships. You have a couple of choices as a teacher. You can either build relationships, you can ignore relationships, or you can destroy relationships. And all three I've seen at various schools I've worked at or worked with. But I'm going to tell you that what we want to work on is the positive student-teacher relationships. More so than ever before, we really need to build these relationships. We have learned since the pandemic that these relationships, not only with their teachers, adults, and other students and their friends, that are so important to students, and without that, when they were robbed of that during the pandemic, many students fell apart. So it's extremely important to encourage these positive student-teacher relationships. Now, there are teachers who just teach class and don't try to get to know their students at all. And I think they're missing out. I don't know how that's even possible. I don't think I could have been teaching for the past 20 so years without getting to know my students. I think I would be so bored, always having this wall between me and them. Then there are teachers who, for whatever reason, and it's usually not intentional, that they destroy relationships with children. Between their school policies, their classroom policies, the way they handle discipline, they don't build relationships, they destroy them. And I'll say in the past, there are certain things that I've done without really thinking about it that have hurt relationships. I have had certain policies when I started out teaching that I copied from other teachers, and then I found that they just really weren't helping the situation at all. But I'll tell you, this past year, many of you already know that I had a very challenging class. And that first day of class, the first day of school, when students are usually on their best behavior because it's the first day, was not in this particular class. I had all kinds of behaviors in this class. I had kids goofing off, just normal middle school goof off. I had a kid who was cussing up a storm. I had another kid who said that he was not coming into the classroom because he did not like the kids in the class. I had kids shouting. I had kids horse playing. This was on the first day of school. We were supposed to, by school-wide, we had all decided that we were going to do a different activity in every class, not working on the actual class. So I teach Spanish. We weren't going to do any Spanish that day. We were just going to be doing like icebreakers and things like that. Well, the thing that I was going to do with my classes, and has always been very successful, was volleyball outside. And it's my version of volleyball. It's what I call word volleyball. We use a beach ball, and in order to hit the ball, you have to be able to say a Spanish word based on the theme, whatever the theme would be. So, like, I usually start with counting. So you go uno, then the next person goes dos, and the next person goes tres, and the goal is to get as high a number as possible and not let the ball hit the ground. That lasted less than 30 seconds. They didn't follow the rules. They were spiking the ball, they were kicking the ball, they were hitting the ball on the roof. So we had to go back in the classroom. And I was like, at the end of that class, I'm like, I have 179 more days of this. And the previous year, I didn't have a class like that, but I had a class um, that we just didn't get along very well. The kids that were in there didn't mesh very well. None of them were bad or anything, but it just was not a class I looked forward to, and I had a negative attitude about that class, and it showed. I tried to hide it, but it showed, and it made me feel bad, and I dreaded that class every single day. I knew I couldn't do that to my students, and I couldn't do that to myself already on the first day of school. So I made a commitment. I made a commitment to say, I am going to love these students and I'm going to love this class. This is going to be my most favorite class of the year. And I'm going to say that to them. I'm going to say that to myself, and I'm going to believe it. And at the beginning, they didn't believe it. They said, you say that to all of your classes. I made sure I didn't. I told anybody would listen. That was my first period, was my favorite class. And they were. I loved those kids. But it wasn't without that mind shift. I had to have that mind shift that I was going to love these kids and I was going to love this class period. And then I had to work on building relationships with these kids. So I worked on that. I worked on getting to know each and every one of the students that were in the class. I welcomed every student into class by name with a giant smile and said how happy that I was to see them every single day. I wanted them to know that. I wanted them to feel it. I wanted to feel it. And that's what it became. Without building these relationships, there is no way that I would have been able to make it through that class, and my students would not have become as successful as they were. So many of those kids were successful over the previous year. The class was designed for kids who didn't pass level 1 the first time. So it was a modified level 1 class. But most of my kids moved on to level 2 at the end of the year. They were able to make up their deficiencies. And I have one other little anecdote of this particular class. I had this one student who was what we call an intentional non-learner. I had a group of them, about 3 or 4 of them in the class, that just refused to do any work. They were just there sucking air. I still loved these kids. I was not angry at these kids. I was just looking for ways to engage them. And I can't remember what started it, but we got into an argument, this student and I, and they walked out of the classroom and they yelled something. I don't remember exactly what it was. And they tore up the paper that I handed back to them and they threw it in the garbage. The next class was my prep period, and I pulled this student back in. Normally, I don't take students out of other classes, but this could not continue anymore. So I called the student back in. The student was crying and I was yelling, and I knew I had to stop. I knew that yelling was not going to get where we needed to be. But I was angry at the moment. I was angry at the attitude I was getting because I'd never given that student attitude. I was angry at the actions the student took by tearing up the piece of paper. that I was giving them. Oh, that's what it was. We had started a policy of if you didn't work diligently during the class period, that you owed me lunch detention. So I passed out a lunch detention pass and wasn't going to have it. Was extremely upset about it. So we yelled back and forth for about 3 or 4 minutes. And then the student broke down and said, I just can't do it. You don't understand. I can't do it. And that was a mind shift for me. I knew the student could do it, but the student didn't believe in themselves. And that was a big deal. So I changed my mindset. I stopped yelling and I came into a more caring role, which is where I should have been in the first place. I wasn't happy that how we got to where we are at this moment, but I was happy that we were here. So I said, I know you can do it, and I'm here to help you do it, but you have to ask for the help. You have to come to me and let me know that you're struggling and what you're struggling with, and I will help you get over any of that. I don't have an issue if you don't get the work done. I have an issue if you don't try to do the work. And that was where I was at. And the student was still crying, and I said, I am not mad at you. I am frustrated with you. I am frustrated because I see so much great potential in you, but you are not trying. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's wasted. I'm yelling because I care so much. I tell my students that, at home, when your parents are yelling at you, it means they care. Because it takes way too much energy to yell and to argue. Way too much energy. And nobody's going to put that energy in if they don't care. I said the time that you start to worry is when they get silent. When you do something you know you should have been yelled at or punished about, and they don't say anything, they're just silent. Same thing with teachers. When teachers don't confront you about your not working, that means they just don't care about you anymore. They've given up, and that's the worst thing. So I said, I apologize for yelling at you. I was frustrated. I was a little bit angry because I know you can do what I'm asking you to do, but you're not trying. So we got past this point, and the student came in during their lunch detention with a smile on their face, and we got our work done. It also coincided that we had a parent conference. The students, all their teachers decided they needed to have a parent conference because the student was an intentional non-learner, not only in my class, but in pretty much all their classes. I was a little bit late in there because I had after school duty once a month for a whole week. We have before school and after school supervisory duty. So I was a little bit late into the meeting because of that. When I walked in and the students saw me, they smiled and welcomed me in. Now remember, in first period, at the end of first period, now this is at the end of our 7th period day, so about 5 hours later, we were yelling at 5 hours earlier at each other. And now the student had the giant smile and welcoming me in to the class, into the conference. So I wasn't happy by how we got to that point, but that building relationship with that student changed the whole outcome for that student in that conference, for the student in the lunch detention, and the student, although did not become a stellar student, tried the rest of the year. And that's what I wanted. So building these student relationships are extremely important, and you want to work towards them. Remember, grades and behavior are not the student. Separate them out. Love the student, don't like the grades, don't like the behavior, but love the student no matter what. Okay, So let's see. Our next topic is. Let me move over here. Oops, and I hit the wrong button. Always hit the wrong button. There we go. We are on rapport and trust, that we want to build rapport and trust with our students. So there are lots of different ways that we can do this. Active listening, being empathetic, and creating a safe learning environment. Please put in your comments in the chat, or if you're watching on the replay, if you have any tips for building rapport with your students, or share a personal anecdote or story of a successful student-teacher relationship you've had. Okay? So, some strategies. You want to build rapport and trust with your students, and that starts at the beginning of class at the door. I am outside nearly every class period, welcoming my students into the classroom by name. Now, names are hard for me. It's not just names of students, but names of people, names of things. I forget brand names. I forget stores. I forget all kinds of things. Names are not something that stays in my head. It takes me a lot of effort to learn students' names. And if something changes with that student, the name goes right out the window. So lots of times after breaks, I forget the names. And definitely after summer break, I forget the names. I've got to relearn them all over again. One of the things I try to do is to, when the kids come into class, once I learned their names, no worry, Joanne, welcome, welcome. You can watch the replay to catch back what we started, but welcome back today. Glad to see you here. What we started talking about was the importance of building student-teacher relationships. So it was an important part, so you might want to go back afterwards and watch the replay for that part. We're just starting here on the second topic, rapport and trust. So, as I said, it starts at the door. I am welcoming the students in by name. Once I learn their names, I challenge myself to make sure I'm calling them by their names. Hola, John. Hola, Tyson. Bienvenido. Whatever I need to do to welcome them in. Fist bumps, handshakes, hugs for some students, always a big smile. I'm building that rapport. I'm also taking time to notice things. What am I noticing? Whatever's different about the student. Are they wearing an interesting shirt? Did they get a new haircut? Are they got some new shoes? Are they wearing some new glasses? Whatever it might be, I'm trying to make connections with students. It's so very important. And this is how you are by building that trust. We want to be active listening, and listening doesn't just happen with your ears. It happens with your eyes as well. So when those kids are coming into my classroom and I notice that they're not as happy as they should be, I'm asking, what's going on today? Do you need a little bit of a break? Do you need to go speak to the counselor? Can I help you with anything? Because I'm actively listening with my eyes. I'm noticing what's going on with that student. I notice that something is changing. Also, if I have to discipline a student, or a student didn't turn in their assignment like they were supposed to, then I'm going to take the student outside for a mini conference. And the first question I'm going to ask is, what's going on? I'm not going to address the behavior. I'm not going to address the lack of work. I'm just going to ask, what's going on in your life right now? Talk to me. And I'm going to listen. I'm not going to say anything other than acknowledge what I'm hearing, but I am going to listen. Joanne says, names are a big challenge this year as I'm new school, so I don't know a single one. It's the same for me. Normally, I teach only 8th graders, so I didn't have the kids before. Last year, I had let's see, how many classes? I had 6 classes. So I had 3 classes of mixed 7th and 8th graders. I had 2 classes of only 8th graders, and then 1 class that was mostly 7th graders. Um, and so I will know some of those kids, the ones who made it to level 3. But my level 2s I'm teaching and my level 1 I'm teaching, I don't know those kids. Our contract maxes out at 170 students. So that's what I'm learning each time. And names are not just a challenge for me at school. Names are a challenge for me, period. I forget my friends' names and I have to tell them, if I forget your name, please don't feel bad. In fact, my friends know so well, if I'm struggling, they know just to insert the name in, because I don't know, it's a medical issue. I don't know what it is, but as I'm getting, not just as I'm getting older, it started when I was younger, but I really do have a problem with names. And it said not just names of people, but names of brands, names of stores. It's really bad. So I get you, and I work really, 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 really hard at learning their names. And I'll tell you one of my secrets. I use flip.com, which used to be called Flipgrid, and it's a video recording service. It's free for teachers. I make counts for all my students before school starts, and my first assignment, I'm not big on homework, but this one I do. I have them introduce themselves in the target language, tell me like their favorite colors, their birthdays, etc. Just, 2 to 3 minutes, and I can watch those and learn their names a little bit easier. So it helps me that way. That's one of the things that I do. And then I normally have a job for kids to pass out papers, but the first month of school, I do that job because that helps me learn their names as well. So those are my 2 little secrets. I am not one of those people who can go, okay, everybody tell me your name through the row, and then the teacher can repeat back their name from memory. That is not me. It takes me a long time, and I let my kids know that so they don't feel bad if I forget their name. I said, if I know your name before December, consider yourself lucky, because it doesn't usually happen. So as I said, we're working on that active listening. Listen to what the issue is, and then only depending on what they tell you, then address either the lack of work or the behavior issue. I had one student a few years ago, excuse me, he was a heritage speaker of Spanish, and he, for whatever reason, he had an attitude with me, and he never had one before. Never, not once. I didn't know where this was coming from, and it wasn't just a little bit of an attitude. It was a big attitude. So I took him out in the hall, and I said, what is going on? This is not like you. And he said, I think I got my girlfriend pregnant. I'm like, oh, that's a big deal. And that means you're going to have about 18 years worth of bad days. So I said to him, why don't you take a few moments? Why don't you go to the library, work it out, think about what you need to think about, and when you're ready to come back, come on back. There was no reason to address his behavior in that situation. He was dealing at a 16-year-old, he might even have been 15, I don't know, 15 or 16, it was high school, with a lot of stress on his shoulders. And so he needed that time, and school was not important at that point, and his behavior, once he figured this out, was not going to be a problem. So that active listening and that empathy that I had helped them. Joanne said, I did that last fall. I also had them take a photo of a partner and text it to me. I end up with each student's name and cell phone to put in my phone. Awesome. Then I make a Quizlet set of my students, also of my new colleagues, which helps me learn their names. Very helpful. Now, my colleagues, I know most of them. We have 2 campuses that are separated by, they're about a quarter of a mile apart from each other. It's the 6th grade campus, and then they cross over for their electives in PE. And there are a couple of electives on the other side. Dance is one of them, so our 8th graders have to go across that way for dance. Those teachers I don't know as well because we don't see each other as often. But on the main campus, I know all the teachers. That's not been a problem. But I've also been there. This is will be my 11th year. So, um, so with that student, listening and empathizing helped that situation. You also want to create a safe learning environment. And that is allowing everybody, no matter their background, no matter who they are, to feel safe in your classroom. You don't let bullying going on. You don't let side comments go on. You don't let looks go on. If they make a mistake, you support them. You don't put them on the spot if you know they can't handle it. All of these things so that they know this is a safe, healthy learning environment and everything will be okay here. I tell them what happens in Spanish class stays in Spanish class. We don't gossip about each other outside of the class. Anything that gets shared or comes up, it's not out for for lunch talk or hall talk. So you build that really safe learning environment. That's how they learn to trust you because they come in not trusting adults. And you need to prove to them that you are trustworthy. That if they give you some information that is in confidence, that you keep that confidence unless the law says you can't. And I let kids know right off the bat, if you talk to me about this, this, or this, I cannot keep it secret. I have to report that. So you're welcome to tell me and share those things with me, but just know that's what I've got to do. Anything else, I don't have to, I won't share with anybody else. And we even have protections in California for kids who are LGBTQ plus. So we are not allowed to out them to their parents. So if they tell us to call them by a different name, usually it goes through the counselor and the counselor fills out a form similar to a 504 form and it lets us know the status. So we know this is the gender they want to identify, or this is how they identify, whether it might be gay or lesbian or transgender or however they identify. Whether or not that is common knowledge with the family or not, or if it's only school, so we don't make the mistakes. Like in a parent conference, I had a student whose name was Arden but went by Aiden. And parents didn't know, and so I had the student for 2 years. Every time I had to make contact with the parents about things, I always had to refer as Arden, which was difficult because I knew them as Aiden. But because of that little piece of paper that we got, it really helped to clarify things because it is illegal. You can get in big trouble by outing a student. So they know this, that it's a safe environment. And so a lot more kids will open up in your classroom if you show them that it is a safe classroom for those types of things. Before we move on, I'm going to tell you another story about how I built rapport and trust with a student over 3 years. It took 3 years. A few years ago, I taught in Las Vegas. Now it's 11 years ago, but this was a few years before that. So I was in Vegas. I was opening a brand new school, and this was a special school. In Vegas, they have a problem with keeping kids in school to graduate. So the law is like they can drop out at 16. The simple thing would just to change the law so you couldn't drop out at 16, but that was too simple for Nevada to think of. So Las Vegas started designing special high schools that geared themselves towards different careers. So the one that I was at was for kids who want to be police officers, 911 operators, computer forensics, and EMT. Those 4 things. So the idea behind that is if kids were starting to take classes they were interested in for their careers And these classes would actually help them progress in the career before they actually graduated high school. They're more apt to stay in school. So I thought this was an interesting concept. So I left the general high school and I went to this particular high school. We had about 10 or 15 of them when I was there, from fashion to medical, all different kinds of things. So I went to this one, um, and it was a great school. And the thing was, it was a special school. So kids didn't earn a right to be here, they had to request that. Joanne says, my new school is known as a school welcoming gender fluid kids. The dorms are for either kids identify as male or female, and one is for gender fluid kids. A goal is to really work hard on pronouns. Yes, that was always hard for me, the pronoun part, um, because the grammar stuck in my head. So I had to work on that. And I always apologize when I made a mistake, but I did make a concerted effort. We do have certain non-gender bathrooms, so they are single bathrooms, and we have one in the main office, one on the main campus, and one on the sixth grade campus that non-gender specific or gender fluid kids, or who don't identify with their birth gender, can use, so they don't have to feel uncomfortable. They can also change there and sit them in the locker room. So yeah, we built that. We took off the genders of those. So, as I was saying, this Joanne says, yes, almost all the bathrooms on campus are any gender. For us, because we're a school that was built in the 50s, most bathrooms are multi-bathroom. So they have multi-stalls and multi-urinals. So they can't do that for those bathrooms. So they took the teacher bathrooms that we had. They took one of each of the teacher bathrooms in all those sections, and they made them gender non-gender specific, because there's only one bathroom at a time. The door locks. Only one person goes in at a time, so it's a little safer for that. Okay, so back to this little story. So kids, if they didn't have the grades or they didn't have the behavior, they could be kicked out of the school. So I had this student, and we knew he was going to be trouble from day one, because on the first day, when the brand new school was open, none of us were knowing anything, from teachers to the children. We were all brand new, and we only opened with freshmen and sophomores. We started with a scavenger hunt that day. And this kid was missing for like most of the day. He didn't return back from the scavenger hunt. So we kind of knew he was going to be a problem. He acted up in my class because he was a sophomore and all the kids at our school had to take language. He was in he didn't take Spanish in his old school as a freshman. So he was a sophomore in a freshman class, which always causes a little bit of issues. So he acted up in class, he caused problems, he didn't do his work, and we had multiple conferences, not just with me, but with his other teachers as well. And it's not a proud moment for me, the school, the administration, or the counselors, but even with his parents' consent, we decided to give up on him. Just let him sit in the back of the room, let him do what he was going to do. As long as he wasn't disrupting the class, it was good. And all I kept saying was, I only have to deal with this kid to the end of the year, and he won't be able to come back because he doesn't have the grades and he doesn't have the behavior. He drew very graphic, horrific, not like school threat kind of stuff, but he was really into gore and that kind of thing. So he was very artistic in that way and drew a lot of that pictures that a lot of kids were kind of horrified by. He wasn't liked by his peers. It was just a huge problem. So I made it. We didn't like each other, by the way. He knew I didn't like him, and I didn't, and he didn't like me. It was, exactly how that was. So I made it through the school year, and I'm thinking, good, I won't have to see this kid again. I was so happy. Next year, guess what? Oh my gosh, he's back on my roster. Now we had those first 2 years, we had two Spanish teachers. How he got back on my roster, I don't know. How he got back in school, I don't know, because he didn't have the grades and he didn't have the behavior. But here he was. So now he's a junior in Spanish 1. This was the first time that I made this connection from what Susie Gross, who is a former TPRS teacher and Spanish and French middle school teacher. And she was a trainer for many, many years before she retired. She used to say you need to love every student. And yeah, I heard that, but it just went in one ear and went out the other. This kid, I needed to make it. In Vegas, we had 181 school days, and I just said, I got to love the student. So I worked it. I didn't work on any Spanish with him. I just worked on loving him. So when he came into class, I acknowledged him. I talked about his shirts. He always had different shirts on, different cartoons or words on them. I commented about his artwork that he drew on his stuff, working my way through. It started to slowly work. We were kind of lukewarm to each other. And he wasn't a pain in my butt in the class anymore. He turned into the class clown, but a productive class clown. He was doing his work. He didn't care that all the kids knew that he failed Spanish 1 the first time. He let them all know. But he was working his butt off, and he passed level 1. So come the next year. It's his senior year. And it's his 3rd year, and I got him again. By now, we have 3 Spanish teachers. I don't know how I kept getting the same student over and over again. We still were only about lukewarm with each other. But I continue to love this student. He's now in Spanish 2. And I worked on this relationship each and every day, building that rapport, building that trust up. And come April, I have a note on my desk from this student. I'm like, oh gosh, what's this going to say? And he said to me, he asked if I could write him a job recommendation because he was going to get a job before summer started for his senior year. So I did that for him, and everything worked out. Now, at the end of the year, we actually started to like each other, and he invited me to his graduation party afterwards. And yes, he actually did graduate, which nobody thought he was going to be able to do. So it took a long time, my point for this, but the constantly working at it, building that rapport and trust can really make changes. And sometimes with these kids, you have to defocus what you're trying to teach them and just work on the relationship. Because without the relationship, you're not going to teach them anything anyways. Joanne says, kids like that can be so hard. To help me love them, I have taken to referring to them as mis amores instead of clase, and individuals as mi amor or querido or similar. I try hard to mean it. Yes. One of my teachers I used to work with, she always called them her pobrecitos. So she always worked for that way, and she really cared about her students and worked really hard to show that love for them. But it's not always easy. Okay. Let's move on to the growth mindset. So you want to explore ways to foster a growth mindset in your students. So like I told you in the beginning in that first story about that student that we got in that argument and they said they just couldn't do it. And I said, that's what I'm here for, to help you there. That's partly that growth mindset. Yes, you can. You might need help now, but you won't always need help. But let's start here with the help, and we can do it together and become successful. Susie Gross also said there's nothing that builds success like success. So give students small successes that you can build on. Those are the stepping stones, the staircases to bigger successes. And the bigger the success, the more the kids feel competent to do it. So that's that growth mindset. You can't do it yet, but with my help, you will be able to. You can also help them with this by providing constructive feedback. Don't point out their errors all the time. In fact, I rarely, if ever, point out their errors unless it's so bad that it's causing a huge misunderstanding, or what they're saying and what they mean are so different that it could be like inappropriate, not deliberately inappropriate, but they just said something incorrect, and native speakers will take it as inappropriate because they anglicism. Kind of like with caliente. If you use it wrong, it means something completely inappropriate, and the kids tend to use it that way without even knowing. So those are the things I'm trying to work. Those are where I point out the errors. Otherwise, it's constructive feedback. Here's a tip for next time that you can work on. Give them something to grow on, something positive to grow on with that. Encourage perseverance. The best way for perseverance that I love is what Michelle Whaley and Laurie Clark invented, the embedded reading, because it starts with that small little piece, and the students have to keep persevering through each additional version until they get to the final version. So encourage this perseverance. If they find a text that's difficult, tell them, take it step by step, line by line, and they can persevere and get through it. Many years ago, because I also taught heritage and native speakers, I had Harry Potter in Spanish on my bookshelf. No Spanish learner had any business reading that book in Spanish. It was just way too hard with too many non-frequent words that were specific to the Harry Potter world. And I'm not a Harry Potter person. I don't read the books in English, let alone Spanish. But I know a partner teacher of mine in AP tried teaching it, and it was just way too hard for the kids, even in AP. But this kid wanted to read it. He loved Harry Potter. He couldn't read it. He was in level 2. There's no way he could read it. But he persevered in level 2, in level 3, and in level 4. It took him 3 years to read that book. And I know he was understanding parts of it because I saw Harry Potter vocabulary creep into his vernacular. Whether it be speaking or writing, I saw the words coming in. Some of the words I didn't know, and I had to look up, and I go, oh gosh, it's a Harry Potter word. Oh gosh, it's a Harry Potter word. But I know he was learning from it because he had such the greatest interest in Harry Potter that he persevered through that book, page by page by page. And also celebrate progress. It doesn't matter how small that progress is. If I have a student who always answers me in English and one day uses one word in Spanish to answer a question, whoa, I'm having a little 1-minute party with that kid. High five, celebrate, give applause. Class, they give applause. I'm giving extra participation points. I'm making that kid feel as awesome as I possibly can. I am celebrating that progress. It is so important to celebrate that progress. It's those little successes that lead to bigger successes. If they can't go from step to step to step, from success to success to success, they're not going to try. And most kids who quit or fail your class, usually it's because they've met with too many failures in their school life and have given up. Some of them have met so many failures before they even got to your class that they're not even going to try in your class. And that is so sad. So, giving them this growth mindset, giving them constructive feedback that doesn't focus on what they did wrong, encouraging perseverance, and celebrating every bit of progress with the students will help them grow and be better at what they're doing. I encourage you in the comments or in the chat, if you have any examples of how you promoted a growth mindset in your classroom, I'd love to learn about it, whether you're watching it replay or you are watching right live with us. If you'd like to share, please do so. while you might be thinking about that, let's go on to our last topic, which is communication. You want to have effective communication with your students. You want to have clear instructions, positive reinforcement, and timely feedback. I'll tell you, there's nothing that I hear that students complain about more is that when kids do this big project or this big assignment, this essay or whatever, and a teacher takes forever to give it back to them with a grade. Kids absolutely hate that. They hate that with a passion. And so try not to do that. I try to give my kids all their stuff back within 24 hours. If it's a big assignment, then I stagger when I start and when I end it for each class. So one class might start it 2 days later than another class, so that I'm only getting one class's work at a time to grade. That way I can focus on grading that and turn it back the next day. At the very latest, I will turn it back at the beginning of the next week. But I try not to take any work home with me, so I'm not going to grade it over the weekend. So I really work on that 24 hours. It really does build, again, more rapport and trust. Kids know that they aren't going to have to wait forever about the grades, or they're not going to have to worry about, oh my gosh, I don't even remember doing that. It's been so long before I got the grade. Clear instructions. I have found that most problems come from not giving clear instructions. I remember, oh my gosh, when I was teaching that heritage language class back in Vegas, these were sophomores, so I assumed they knew how to write a double-spaced essay. So I didn't explain it. Let's see what Joanne says here. Joanne says, I always buy 1 or 2 non-readers whenever I go home to Mexico. The favorite of stronger kids at my last school was La Telaraña de Charlotte. And yes, they bring in lots of new vocab. Yes, I have some of those as well. I cleared my shelves mostly since I don't teach heritage speakers anymore. But if I see a kid is struggling, or I know that they might be interested in a particular book, I have them in my cabinets that I can bring out. Awesome. So I gave this assignment. I told them, hello, okay, why don't we go ahead and we're going to write an essay. It's about this topic. I put in the instructions. I want it double spaced. I want it, so many words, etc., etc., etc. When I got them back, this is what I got back. Word, space, space, word, space, space, word, space, space, word, space, space, word. They didn't know how to write an essay double spaced as sophomores in high school. And my administrator, she was so funny. She is an English teacher. She says, oh no, you can't assume anything when giving instructions. You have to give them explicit. So she goes, how she used to give essays is she would write an essay herself that gave the instructions. So in the upper right hand corner, it would say, your first and last name go here. Return. Your date goes here. Return. Your class period goes here. Return. Next space. Centered. Here is where you put your title. Return, return. Here is your first paragraph. It should introduce your topic. It should include a thesis sentence that includes 3 areas for your subtopics within the essay. And she would continue going that. She would write her 5-paragraph essay, but it's all instructions. So clear instructions, don't assume anything. Don't assume anything. Make sure that that the instructions are clear for everybody to understand. It will take away a lot of issues right off the bat. And then positive reinforcement. Whenever kids do something that is worthy of repeating, the behavior, the work that they do, the questions that they ask, any of those things, give positive reinforcement. It could be as simple as a high five, or I give out participation points for those kinds of things. And it really encourages a very helpful and uh, a prosperous learning environment. That was what I was looking for. Communication, though, just doesn't happen with kids in class. Last year, for the very first time, and it worked wonders, is I started communicating with parents weekly. I told them what we were working on, what should have been turned in by their students last week, anything that was coming up every week. I started the day before school started and introduced them to me, who I was, and what my class was going to be like. Just a short email, and I kept up an email every week to every one of my parents. But not only that, I also wrote emails to each of my students every week. Now, not each of my students individually. I wrote, to all my level ones, all my level twos, and all my level threes. So I wrote 3 emails a week to them. And then I wrote to all my level 1 parents, all my level 2 parents, and all my level 3 parents. So I wrote 6 emails a week, scheduled them through my learning management system to go out on Sundays. And it really, really worked well. It built rapport with my parents. My parents didn't ask me what was going on in class as much because I was giving them that information. They knew where to look for missing assignments and what kids should turn in. And so that communication helped. Now, I don't know why I didn't do that for the past 20 so years I've been teaching. It was last year, the first year that I did that. It wasn't a newsletter. I know some teachers do newsletters. That's too much. Mine was just a short, informal email, but it was every week. So please let me know in the comments or if you're watching live in the chat, if you have any positive feedback strategies or communication activities or building student-teacher relationships. Please put them in the comments or the chat so we can have a greater discussion. I have some students on here who are hijacking my live today. Yes, I do remember period 3, 21, 22. I do remember. Okay. So if anybody has any questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat, or if you are watching on the replay, go ahead and put them in the comments, and I'll come back and check on them. In the meantime, I would like to invite you to like and subscribe. It helps get these videos out to other teachers so that they can learn as well. I'm trying to get my subscribers up to my first 1,000. I'm almost there. We're almost on my year of doing live. So I started this, I think this is our 49th one. And we're almost there. Yes, it is our 49th one. So 3 more after this, and it will be a full 52 that I have done. I've done every week for a year. So please go ahead and like and subscribe if you found any value here. Also, I want to remind you that we still have our CI summer camp going on. So if you're interested in joining that, we have 2 more live classes, but all the classes have been recorded. It is a 10-part summer webinar series. You can go to mm.us/summercamp and you can join that. Joanne said, I have so many I need to go back and watch the ones I have missed. Yes, we have done it for a whole year, Joanne. You've watched a few of them, but yes. Let me go ahead and put this in the chat so everybody can see the link. So with that, I'm going to get ready to end unless you have any other questions. Next week, we are going to be talking about classroom management hacks. So I'm excited for that one. We'll talk about that one next week. Same time, same channel, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, next Monday. So with that, thank you all for showing. I really appreciate you hanging out with me today. This is a little bit longer one, and I hope to see you next week. And with that, I'm saying goodbye. Have a good one, everyone.